within the polarity. Now, what is polarity here? Yeah, please do not draw anything on the screen. No, kindly do not touch the screen, please. Oh, 1 second. So the polarity in the international relations here, if we see this polarity is nothing but a um, polarity is nothing but the distribution of power here. We can see this as a power here. So so standard status, which means that is against the military power that we can see. So there are three types of systems. One is unipolarity, bipolarity, and multipolarity. So these three systems are the systems depends upon the distribution of power we can see. So then there is Kenneth Walls. Okay, he is one of the philosophers, international. Yeah, I hope you can see my voice whiteboard. Within their development and how advanced they are. So, this number of great powers, what they do, they shape the security dynamics and the conditions on which they are acting and how they are interacting here. So, international scholars they have said about this pole as a state here. Now, what is this pole? Pole is a state here. Now, this state is what this commands, especially a largest share of the resources. It is having a large scale of the resources and it commands also the capability states as well because it wants to achieve its ends here. The ultimate goal of the state can be anything that what it wanted to achieve. So that when the achieve to meet its end, it will of all the elements of the state capability. Conventionally, if you see, it is the size of the population, the territory, the resources, the economic capacity, the military might, and the organizational institutional competence that we see here. Okay, so with the bipolarity meaning, now we'll go with the polarity is nothing but the distribution of power here. So this bipolarity is nothing but the distribution of power in two states here. Bi means two, as I already have stated. It means the two states which have the majority of the economic, military, and the cultural influence that we can see. Either they'll have it internationally or regionally. Or the system of the world that we say, where the majority of the global economic, military, and the cultural influence that is held between the two states that we see. So, in the classic case of bipolar world, is when there was a cold war that was going on between the two power blocks, two superpower blocks. What are those two superpower blocks? One is United States, and another is the Soviet Union here. So, all these two superpower blocks they have dominated most half of the 20th century here. And so there is a definition given by the Hans J. Power, so that they keep involved in power struggle. So to remain in that power, how they are struggling to get that power here. So they are in the race of getting and acquiring that power here. So in this power struggle, none of that there are power superpower they want to lag behind, because they want to be always in the front row. Okay, so what are the events that led to the bipolarity? Is the major was the European event, and the another was the end of the World War II, because that has acted as a very critical phenomenon in the transition of, because there was a lot of transition, which means the changing of the power balance and the set, and there was an emergence of what new global superpowers here. Okay, so then after that, which is the Soviet Union and the United States, and whereas with other countries it has forced. So where other countries, because those other countries were newly developed countries and their all of the resources were ruined here, so they either wanted them to join their forces here. So the USSR also has offered an ideology, their economic and social model extending a lot here. So even the same the United States has done here. So if we see the conflict of interest between the new world powers, that has actually again it got multiplied here. So with the climate of whatever, so each country they feared among the new power that has been coming into existence. So after the end of the Second World War, many of the other European powers they were collapsed here, because the European powers such as Britain, France, Italy, Germany, they have dominated the whole of the. If we see arena before the Second World War, as the First World War started. From the First World War onwards, we see all these countries has dominated till the third world countries that we see. So if we see the bipolarity and the proxy wars, now what is proxy war here? Proxy war is nothing but a great hostility through client states. Okay, so client state is what, now you are a home country and there is another country which is called as a client state. Ideological goals within the confines of nuclear deterrent postures. Okay, so here one more definition given by Carl Jung about the proxy wars. What he says that it is an international conflict between two foreign powers. Foreign powers means one country with the another country which are fought on the soil of some another country, which means the third country. So those are disguised on the conflict over an internal issue. Some issue they might have that A, B are fighting on the soil of third country here. Okay, so on some issue, some internal issue that they have, you might say that if they are having a issue of their resource distribution or whatever it is, and using some of the country's manpower as well, the resources and the territory for means of achieving their foreign goals and interests here. And if we see, this crisis and this war have been occurred between the alliance systems, and so many lives were lost in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan wars. And the Cold War has also led to a lot of shooting wars, but it did not lead to another world war, hopefully. And then the advantages of bipolarity, if we see, first was it has made weaker states to participate in institutional arrangements and dominated one or the another major players here. Next is the bipolarity, which is less prone than the multipolarity, because it's where only there are two, right? So, because each superpower knows that how they can threaten each other here. The third thing is like with the bipolar blocks here, at least complicates three common paths, which is uncertainty, free riding, and fear of allied defection of superpowers. Okay, so there are few disadvantages as this has divided into two alliances, Western and the Eastern here, which is the US and the Soviet Union. And the second disadvantage was the some smaller states they were forced to join any of one of the alliances here, so they got the promise of they'll get all those protection of weapons, their economic are trying to get the support from the smaller states. Okay, so then there was the concept of bipolarity. First, there were two rival powers that could not be remain in the equal, and one has to go to the other, and therefore the conflict is inevitable, which means it dynamics. Here we see say that has been um, there was an outgrowth of the systematic balancing has been increased here. So this is what your bipolarity is. Then coming to the unipolarity, which means into a one state. Here power is distributed into the one state, most of the cultural, economic, military influences. So it is how it is been influenced, how it has been differentiated is with the hegemony, which means the power and the empire here. Okay, so according to Monterio, he says this is defined by three characteristics. One is that it is very much different from system. Second is a unipolar state, which is very much significantly constrained by anarchy that we see, because whatever the state says they have to follow, and which has set a part of hegemony because the state is only powerful here, and which is enabling to control the foreign policies of other states as well. And third characteristic is like this obstructs the international systems towards a balance of power here. That it is leading states power advantages and removing the problem of hegemony, which means the again the hegemony is nothing but how you want to get that power, the control. So problem of power rivalry between the world politics here. And next reason was the balance of power politics, the of what of the major states. When two major states, it would be very difficult to get that power balance of power here. Okay, so that with the dominance of US as in the 1990s, Soviet Union has been collapsed, and this has led to the absence of balance of power. Become the superpower. Now also we call this US as a big B, as a big brother as well, and that has become the unipolar here. And all zones located in the global America, whatever with their political orbit, they have included as the democratization and Americanization. Because with this spread of American goals, with parallelly that how they are going with the implementations of all their American interest and the expansion of all the zone of direct American control on the global scale that we see. And also, unipolarity has shown its central in Europe on one hand, and there was a rising powers like China, India, Russia, Latin America on the other, which that has convinces this traditional superiority of the West as well. So as long as there is a security policies that we see around with the power and preferences of Seoul, Pole, second tier states, other state security, as well as with their unilateral power advantages. So this support of unipolarity shows art that is leading to a more stable system, because there is only one power state, the major state here. So with the multipolarity, that means more than two nations in comparison to bipolar system. So the structure is a multipolar system, which is much complicated that we see. And this multi we tend to see in the present globalization, we see there are new competitors, there are new markets, and the whole world is open for you to do your business, your trade, and everything, right? So the new order has been characterized by a economic power here that we can see. So this multipolar has become global reality. So, coming with the features of multipolarity, it has isolation replaced with regional interdependence, due to the process of so yeah. With the multipolarity act, it is largely uh, on two accounts. One is it is introducing diversity with different actors, how they are playing multiple interests. Everybody has their own interests. So that is what then there we tend to see the multiple creating scenarios within the cooperation, which is becoming harder to achieve here because with the multi interest that they have here. So this multipolar world is defined by three factors. One is the diversity of actors, changing pattern of global rules and norms, commonality of the interest that we can see here. So as there was a rise, as there was a dominance of US after the collapse of Soviet Union. So the decline of United States of America as a unipolar world, here it was able to secure a unipolar system for second decade of the 21st century that we see. Okay, so if we see this, there was a US. It has got a very long, prolonged, unproductive military adventures that we see in Iraq and Afghanistan. So all this has linked with its economic recession that has come up from US only, and that has shown a decline in the American power, which is called as Washington Consensus. Okay, so there was an unstable situation that was going on in the West that has complicated a kind of instability. There was no stable thing that was going in the Eurozone in 2011, which has pushed this second most important market into the crisis here, which is the West market here, which is the largest market. As there was a crisis here, and on the other hand, if we see the rise of several large developing countries like China, India, Russia, Brazil, are rising up, eventually there was a decline here. So the advantages of the multipolar world, if we see, that is entailing with the margins for the states which is decreased, and the new player in the global economies, they have shaped a multipolar world here. From they have are shifting their global patterns here as well. So every state they are having particular qualities, and then there is an increasing role of UN, which means the United Nations in the within the issues of population growth and how with the human rights, because at the time of this And with the presence of the nuclear weapons, with the source of instability that we can see, and this terrorist, they have got the armed nuclear weapons, biological weapons. With the and the first time in history, we see there was a stability of the future that has not dependent on the unpredicted effects of rivalry, but there was a dangerous potential of middle and small powers and the non-state actors. And then with the middle powers and with the small powers and the non-state actors with the nuclear capabilities, overall a kind of how the world has been slowly after the wars that has been happened, how it got with the bipolar world, then it went to the unipolar world. Now it is a multipolar world because there was a rise of other nations. With the decline as the Soviet Union has collapsed, then there comes the US into the picture. And within the decline, with the crisis, with the Washington crisis here, then there was a rising of other major countries like China, Russia, India, and Latin America. Like that, there was a major of the countries that now we see coming into of it as a globalization process as well. So, with our second next unit, which is the superpowers Cold War and the post Cold War, and within um, this term was coined by William T. Fox. The superpower, which means a great power, the name itself tells you that it is a great power where there is armed force and you can deploy a strategic theater opposed to greater power with their interest and influence, how they are confined to single regional theater here. Okay, so the major power here it is very different from a superpower. Okay, so the country can be described as major power when boleto when there are elements of power along with nuclear power. Most of the countries in the present their world they have the nuclear powers which with that nuclear power they maintain their capacity, they maintain their balance of power with their reason that we can see. Okay, so why did this has come up into picture with the emergence of superpowers? Because one of the significant development was with the emergence of two blocks that we see. One is US and another is the USSR as per their superpowers here. And you see, and after it has become all those international relations has become Eurocentric, which means European based here till the end of the all of the wars here. Then after that, US has become after the end of the wars. We see the US has become the decision taking factor in the international relations here. It has become a big brother, the major power that we can see. So there are two states that have suffered heavy losses during the war, and they were able to retain a position of their superiority in terms of economic, military, and industrial capacity as well. And then with the emergence of United States has a power that superpower that we see after the Second World War, one country which has got a potential that where another country nobody had. So in July 1945, this Americans they exploded experimentally the first nuclear bomb where the famous the in the history that we cannot that no world can forget about that nuclear explosion done in the Japan, which is the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that has broke the opposition of Japan, led for to surrender absolutely completely here. So the after this the world here, and it has the world has shocked as both the US allies and the Soviet Union they were kept in as nobody was known about that these countries had that nuclear bomb here. So this Japan has surrendered here with such situation deprived of the USSR also. And besides nuclear weapons, America has become a superpower here. And after the Pearl Harbor issue, Americans they have engaged in unmatched war, the civilian lives, the property that has been left, a lot of things untouched. So we see the American foreign policy in this era that has took up a way approach where it has included all those economic assistance and military cooperation. If we see the military strategy adopted by the America has resulted in the several military pacts and alliances with these countries here, which is called as NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Then there was again the emergence of Soviet Union as a superpower that we see, so which eventually has led to the Cold War here. So now what is Cold War? This Cold War is mainly, if we see, that has originated from the German issue only, because in the First World War we see Germans were so much deprived here. They thought that it is they could take a revenge karke. They wanted to start a Second World War is what they thought, because they thought there was a lot of disrespect that they got, and there was a no favor in them. So it has remained there into Europe for a long time, and the surrender of Germany after the Second World War has created extremely very sensitive situation between the Western powers and the Soviet Union. So according to Yalta and Potsdam Conference, there they have decided that they could joint control over Germany by UK, the US, the France and USSR, and they could eliminate Nazi influence and restore democracy again in the Germany here. So the Cold War, if we go see Bernard Baruch, he's an American industrialist and statesman. He has coined the term called Cold War, which means intense, very deep, very strong hostility and the tension that has developed from the relations between the USA and the USSR, which is a bipolar conflict here, because the world was after the second world during the second world war that we can denote, the world was divided into two strong major powers here. So the main feature of this Cold War was it is a complete breakdown of relations between the before wartime allies as well. So the second feature was that there was a growth of big arms race between the two blocks here, because one block says that we have a lot of weapons, another block says that we have nuclear weapons, we have bombs, we have atom bombs, nuclear bombs. So there was a big arm race that we can see here. The third feature was that there was a conflict between the superpowers that was not confined to one region only, like Europe or Asia, but slowly, as there was a island, it has extended to other parts of the world as well. So we can see the origins of Cold War that has been traced back from the 19th, 17th Russian Revolution, which has given birth to the new system, and this has emerged as an exploitative capitalist system here, and where we see the USSR, this has made serious efforts to get those Western powers, and there was a rapid rise of Nazi in the Germany as well. So the second, meanwhile, in the time gap, the Second World War has broke out in 1939, and whereas as Germany wanted to take revenge, Germany has attacked the USSR, violating its non-aggression pact here. So then there comes the Berlin Crisis, which was the first confrontation between the Russia and the West over the Germany here. So we see again the Soviet Union also responded by blocking all the access to the Berlin in June 1948. So for almost a year, British and American planes that has landed on the Temple's airport carrying food, clothing, coal, everything. And the Russians, they ended the blockade in the May 1949. So another factor for the Berlin crisis was the signing of NATO in April, and that was created in the same following year, and where again there comes the Korean crisis in 1948, where there was a split into two separate countries, the Communist People's Democratic of Korea, the north of the 30th parallel, and the US here, which has supported the Republic of Korea in the south. And then within the phases of Cold War, if we see, um, growing mistrust and to 1953. Okay. So in that, if we see, as this Soviet Union has imposed this communist regimes in Eastern countries, this US had to contain the spread of communism. So US President Truman in so this Truman doctrine is what it is a outcome of this process only. So where it is a manifestation saying which is applied only to Greece and Turkey to save it from civil war here. And another secretary, American Secretary of State George Marshall, he has announced the Marshall Plan on 5th June 1947. In December 1951, if we see, USA has came forward with European recovery programs, and which is also known as that So that's Soviet has sent troops to preserve those communist rule in East Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Afghanistan. That we can see. Another was the relaxation of the Cold War and the detente period. In this meanwhile period, we tend to see then there was a PTBT in 1963, that is an agreement which is known as partial test ban treaty, because every day those two power blocks they were saying we are having atom bomb, we are having nuclear. So there was a Cuban crisis that has also ended in peace. And after that thing, there was a in 1963, following with the end of Cuban crisis, there was a PTBT, which is the partial test ban treaty. So then 1967, nuclear test weapons, those were. So in 1972, we see there is a SALT one that was been signed between USA and USSR, and again it was followed by some interim arms control that was signed between them two in Moscow in 1974, and again it was followed and it was converted into SALT 2 SALT in 1978. So these agreements were has decreased the tensions of Cold War that we can see, because armaments that we will see we are having, so it was trying to threatening the world with its major nuclear weapons, and everybody was trying to test those nuclear weapons, as if they are testing those nuclear weapons that it would be harm to the whole of the world there. So the period between this 1969 to 1978 is a decline in the antagonism, which means the opposition of the Cold War and the rise of detente that we see. Now, what is detente here? Detente is nothing but you are solving the differences that there has been created, the conflicts, the disputes, the whatever the ladai that they are doing, not by the force, but by some uh, the threats or rattling, but kind of peaceful conference table thing that they could get some certain kind of trust and ability, so that they could have their legitimate interest. And then there comes the new Cold War from 1979. So the detente was peak at the time of Helsinki conference that was held in the 1975. So in 1970s, we see the communist government that has installed in the Afghanistan. So USA has supported anti-communist forces and economic and get some military and economic aid from USSR. So the USA it has termed the presence of USSR army in Afghanistan as an invasion here that we can see. So then there was an Afghan conflict between the two superpowers, which are termed as again the rebirth of new Cold War situation. Now with the Afghanistan issue, they have created the new Cold War that we can see. Escalated lot of the regional Cold War in the 1970s between the Iraq versus Iran, between the USSR and the China over the border issues, and between the India and between the Pakistan over the issue of Kashmir that we see. So the end of Cold War. Now, when did it has been end? So then there comes the it has ended by 1985, and Michael Gorbachev he has become the president of the Soviet Union, and where this reformation that has came up from Eastern countries, and Gorbachev he has realized that country cannot be compete with the United States here in terms of to come up with the reform agenda, and where there was an economic globalization that has created a lot of turmoil in the whole of the world economy in the 20th century. So the Soviet Union leadership led by this Gorbachev, it has made to a realization that the whole of the entire system of communism is defunct here, and they will not compete with the Western ideology of capitalism. Because if we see the ideology of the USA, that is very much capitalistic in the behavior. Union has abandoned its 99 war in the sorry 9-year war in the Afghanistan here. So after the realization, they have ended the 9-year war that has been happened in the Afghanistan. So in October 1990, we see Germany was united, and with the Warsaw Pact in 1991, the military bloc that was headed by the Soviet Union, which was dissolved here. And after that, then there comes the, since after the October Revolution of 1917, it has came up to an end here. So on December 25, 1990, the still highest Soviet official, he has recognized the bankruptcy and the collapse. That is how we see in this way only, as they felt the realization, and in this way only it has led to the collapse of the Soviet Union here, and the USSR was dissolved, that we can see here. So the world history has been so much influenced from 1922 to 1991 here. So with the results of Cold War, if we see, where we see there was a lot of various alliances like NATO, CETO, Warsaw Pact, CENTO, and this was formed. So, with the present problem of the poverty and the health education, and the Cold War has distributed peace of the world, and the proxy has been eliminated. And there comes the post Cold War. Now, Cold War has come to an end. Then, what has happened after the Cold War? Then there was an end of history, and the last man that we see. Internet, and with the north south conflict, because the world has been divided, and after that we see new independent countries has been came up into existence, which that new third world countries are also known as developing countries. They were little exploited because of this colonialism, and there was a conflict between the north south, and then there comes the Asia Pacific that has emerged as a new subsystem. support on the Zionism. These are all has reflected the growing US dominance that we can see. And we see the many emerging countries in the world, they want to again revamp the United Nations Security Council. And then there comes the clash of civilizations. So where there is a famous philosopher called is Huntington. He's from Harvard University. In his book called The Clash of Civilization, he went with a hypothesis here with his work, with his assumption about the conflicts about the future, primarily not on the ideological or the economic, but with the cultural and the fault lines here of the future, not between the nations, but with the civilizations. He is what he has intelligence. This has led to the state policy, um, a matter of concern here, because many countries in the world are affected by the religious fundamentalism. Then there was a emergence of new Cold War origin here, and Edward Lucas, in his famous book called The New Cold War, he has analyzed the trends of the new Cold War against the Russia, Ukraine. Against the Russia. So in Ukraine, that we see there is a proxy state for the American government's chief foreign policy, for what the main aim is to defeat Russia here. By changes in technology, the transportation, the regulatory and environment. On the other, we see the US, China, Japan, and the EU and the India. They are capable of getting that economic strength, right? So there are technical advancement as well. So in post-Cold War era, major feature is the multipolarization. Okay, so the China is now the second largest economy in the world that we see, that has made the US behind the after the US that we see. Meanwhile, this China has become the world's biggest creditor state as well. And not only that, we also see that there is a rebalancing or the pivot strategy towards the Asia Pacific and the failure of this Trans Pacific Partnership, which is called as TPP. So, and there was a OBOR, which is China's initiation of One Belt, One Road, and the Asia Pacific Free Trade Area, FTAAP, with the establishment of Asia Infrastructure Investment Bill and the BRICS, and the New Development Bank, and also India's Act East policy. So, there was before, there was a Look East policy. Now, in present, we are acting East policy. This has made to adopt scene of the India and how well it is portraying itself on the global sphere that we can see in the today's scenarios as well. So this post Cold War has increased the competition between the US and the China, and that has become current situation of distribution as also enabling this greater powers, also with the middle and the small powers, to develop their capabilities, their potential, so that they could not threaten the world peace and security here. So this is what today's class is about. Thank you.